Welcome to the first lecture where I'm looking at all the different ways to start and end your talk, with the lesson starting with a P. The first one is a promise. A promise is a statement telling someone that you will definitely do something or something will happen in the future. And you can weave this either at the beginning of a talk or at the end of a talk. Number 2 is incorporating a poem into your speech. Now, you don't have to recite the entire poem, just a few lines of the poem, whichever part of that poem is going to sink in with your message. And again, after you have included that line, say where it's from, and then weave your speech immediately thereafter. Number 3 is known as a prophetic challenge. This is where you're calling your audience to action and you're getting them to a higher plane. A famous example of this came from the speech by John F. Kennedy, where he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." That is an example of a prophetic challenge, and you can easily incorporate this into your talk. Number 4 is known as a plea. And number 5 is a pledge. Now, a plea is where you are asking your audience to do something for you. Usually done in types of speeches like charitable organizations where you're asking for feedback or assistance or some sort of financial aid. And a pledge is where you are committing that you're going to be doing something. And again, a pledge or a plea usually happens at the end of a talk. Number 6 refers to a present theme. This is where you are making a statement and it's in alignment with the theme of why you are speaking on the day. A famous example of this is Nelson Mandela's inaugural speech in 1984, where he said, "Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted for too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud." And as you can see, the words of what he said aligns to the theme of newborn liberty in a new democratic society. Number 7 is picture. Now let's assume you've just been introduced onto the stage and you come onto the stage and you start off your speech like this. Picture the scene. You're at the beginning of a race. You are 3rd row from the front. And as you look around you, you ask yourself, how did I end up here? How did I end up here 5 o'clock in the morning at -1 degree temperature? And I'm about to enter a massive race. And then bam! You hear the noise that starts this race. The gun explodes. And so you head off. Now this is a scene that I've described for you. And as I was describing it to you, you were picturing the scene. And this is what I mean by this technique, where you start off your presentation in a way that describes the scene, and then you weave into the content of, say, what you've learned about taking part in races, or the discipline that comes in taking part in competitive racing. That's number 7. Let's look at the next technique, number 8. Number 8 is a physical demonstration. An example of this is Muhammad Katani, the 2015 World Champion of Public Speaking. When he came onto the stage, he had a cigarette that he didn't light up, but he used that as a demonstration. And at some point, he put the cigarette down and he started giving you all these facts and figures about smoking. And then he thought it was true, but it wasn't. So his speech was all about the power of words, but he used a bit of a demonstration at the beginning of his talk to weave into his content. Number 9 is a powerful comparison. The 2014 World Champion of Public Speaking, Dineshrie Pillay, he came onto the stage with a red rose. And he started off his speech saying, "You are not any different to this red rose. Just like this red rose, you are unique." And so he goes into a speech about uniqueness and how people can take away your uniqueness. But by using a comparison of a rose, he basically weaved into his content. Number 10 is known as a preview flashback. And I'd only suggest that you use this technique once you understand your stage between story space and content space. Because this technique requires you to basically move in between your content and your story. So you start off your speech saying, I would like to talk to you about the importance of respect. And so you'd sort of get back into your story space and say, back when I was 10 years old, this is what happened to me. And you travel the story as you talk about what you learned about respect as you were growing up. And so you're constantly going up and down between the content of what you're delivering, and then you're coming back into the story space, what is known as a preview flashback. And like I said, only do this if you are very comfortable with your platform and understanding your past, your present, and your future spaces. Let's look at the last technique in this section under P's. Number 11 is known as purposeful humor. In 2016, Darren Tay won the World Champion of Public Speaking. So he came onto the stage, stood for a certain amount of timing without saying anything. And at some point, he put on some jokes and people started laughing. And again, he stayed a bit quiet. And he stayed quiet until everyone was laughing at him. And at some point, he said, "Hey you, how do you like your new school uniform?" And he looks at the crowd and he says, "Well, that's what my high school bully told me." So his entire speech was about bullying. And what I like about that speech is he took some humor in the beginning, purposeful humor, and he used that as a way to transition into a very deep and heavy speech. And so the humor sort of offset what he was actually talking about. So there you have it, 11 ways under P that you could use to start or end your talk. In the next lecture, we'll look at the different ways to start and end your speech, starting with the letter S. I'll see you then.